Hello and welcome to our live Q&A program on 5G innovation for industry verticals. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content for TelecomTV. For the next 60 minutes, we'll be taking your questions about 5G Vinnie, the 5G verticals innovation infrastructure project, and how business verticals can best utilize 5G technology. Now, hopefully you've already watched our two previous programs where we provided more background to 5G Vinnie and discussed the role of telcos and also took a deeper look at case studies in the healthcare sector. If you haven't, they're still available to watch at your convenience. There's links below this video window for you to watch later. And if you have yet to send in your questions, then please do so now. There's a form here on the website. We've already received a great selection, but we're always eager for more. So send them in now and we'll get through as many of them as possible. I'm delighted to say that all four of our previous guests in this series have returned for the live Q&A, and we're also joined by a new guest from another key vertical sector. So let me now introduce Paul Grunsund, who is Senior Research Scientist at Telenor and 5G Vinnie Coordinator. David Kennedy, Director at Eurescom. Deepa Ramachandran, Director of Product Management, Digital Operations at Nokia. Ilanko Balasingham, Professor of Medical Signal Processing and Communications at the Intervention Centre, Oslo University Hospital in Norway. And Kenneth Normeland, who is Senior Radio System Architect with the Norwegian Defence Communications and Information Systems. Welcome, all of you. Thanks very much for taking part today. Now, Kenneth, this is your first appearance with us on this series. Very glad to have you with us. So let me start by asking you, how and why did you get involved with the 5G Vinnie project?
Yeah, thank you. So let me start with the how. In 2017, my organization, the Norwegian Defence Materiel Agency, signed a strategic cooperation agreement with Telenor, and right after, in 2018, Paul Grunsund and his team invited me in to the external stakeholder board in the 5G Vinnie project. And since then, we have been involved in other EU-financed pilots like the FUDGE 5G pilot, where we are exploring the use of private networks. And why did I say yes? So today, military organizations are used daily in operations related to terrorism, refugee crisis, pandemics, and incidents related to global heating like wildfires, floods, landslides, etc. And all the actors in our total defense, including PPDR organization, will communicate over 5G in the future when their Tetranet is terminated. So I will say there are many reasons to use 5G, but the main reason is to be able to communicate efficient among all the actors in our total defense in this new threat picture.
And Kenneth, what did you hope to achieve from your involvement, and what lessons do you think you've learned from the experience so far?
Well, after 1990, most of the innovation in communication is actually happening under this 3GPP umbrella. So I had, of course, high expectations. And me and my team hope to learn a lot, see new possibilities, and eventually also transform the way we operate and collaborate with other actors in the total defense under this new threat picture. We have learned that the possibilities are enormous. When 5G and cloud is merging, we have also learned that we cannot do this alone. We need experts in many areas. Radio, for instance, 5G, security, and cloud technology. And that this is a continuous work. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and the complexity is very high.
Well, as you say, we can't do this alone, and 5G Vinnie is a European Union-backed venture that brings together, I believe, 23 partners, including CSPs, technology vendors and researchers. And as we explained in our previous programs, the goal is to build and test this multi-vendor, multinational 5G environment, thereby helping to accelerate the uptake of 5G by industry verticals in Europe. All of which leads us very nicely into our first viewer question, which is, which industry verticals are you predicting will lead the 5G innovation? And specifically, which industry will be key for 5G to be the differentiator rather than the regular existing 4G services? Paul, let me start by asking you.
Yeah. So, first, I think that we have two key vertical industries with us here today. So, I mean, both the military and the hospitals need strong security, ultra reliability, right? And network slicing coming with 5G is important to them. And in addition to that, both have requirements on low latency and stable performance as well as high throughput for different applications. Then we also work with other verticals that are in the lead as well, such as factories. We work with smart ports, aquaculture, public safety, to mention some. So there are many that are looking into 5G and are leading the way. Though I think one interesting observation that we have when working with the vertical industries is also that we do leverage a lot of the innovations across, such as those we have made here with the military. We also use that with other verticals. And some examples are around network slicing, the autonomous edge cloud, and also end-to-end security. So there are many verticals that are leading the way, I would say.
Thanks, Paul. And Deepa, what's your view on this one? What do you think is going to be the industry vertical that's going to use 5G as its key differentiator?
So, Guy, when I look at how the experience of Nokia has been working with our different customers and then them working with the enterprises, I think the early use cases are where there is commercial readiness already today. So, exploiting more the higher throughput speed that 5G is able to offer. So, we are talking primarily around EMBB. So, we see a lot of use cases around so-called personalized connectivity. So, if you talk in terms of the consumer segment, you talk about working from anywhere, remote classrooms, or remote medical assistance, for example, to start with. But then if you talk in terms of government, enterprises, and so on, you're talking about augmented reality, virtual reality-based support for events, or, for example, drone-based inspection systems, or we can also talk about critical communications where you need to have an always on, always connected experience. But if you look a little bit wider and broaden your horizon, I mean, I would expect more Industry 4.0 use cases to come to the forefront, where you're connecting operations to the wider Internet of Things, industrial internet, and edge cloud, as Paul was also referring to, right? So I think the more the use cases will be more where around economies of scale, where you can use 5G and specifically slicing for improving the productivity and security. So examples like applications in agriculture, where you can remotely monitor crops, decide when you want to harvest them, whether there is any problems or decay, and things like that. Or, for example, enhance security or make it easy for working. Autonomous vehicles more in a mining kind of a sector where security of the personnel is super important. Or, for example, expand it towards fleet management and things like that. So more diversified use cases where you are talking about an ultra reliable network, but also the response time is super critical. But my favorite bet is around the medical use cases, of course, like the kinds that we were talking about in the scope of the 5G Vinnie project. So.
Excellent. Thanks, Deepa. Now, we've got another question here. This is a question we got in early, and it's a great one, this. 5G makes it possible to create new networks, network slices, that are tailored to specific vertical needs, such as public safety network or railway networks. But exactly how is this going to be offered by the mobile network operator? How will they offer this flexibility to verticals? And more importantly, perhaps, what will it cost? Kenneth, from your experience, what's your take on this?
Well, it's a great question. And I think the MNOs are thinking a lot about this nowadays. And how flexible are actually they going to be? Will they offer only these three products, EMBB, IoT, and ultra-reliable low latency? In our case, our defense network slice had to be special designed to meet our requirements. We needed a dedicated 5G core to get control of our metadata and particular location information. We needed isolation from the internet and no roaming or signal links to other operators. We also wanted full autonomy on an enterprise edge in a military airbase, meaning we needed full 5G core functionality with both data plane and control plane in this edge. And so I hope maybe also Paul can answer this. How flexible will they be, representing an MNO here, and what would it actually cost? And it has to be a lower price than continuing to build dedicated networks.
Good, interesting observation at the end there, Kenneth. And well, let's ask Paul. Paul, what do you think?
I get good points, Kenneth. I think we have been working a lot, and we know that the vertical industries will use different type of network slices, right? So typically we talk about enhanced mobile broadband, massive IoT, and ultra reliable low latency communication. But then we also see and observe that there can be many variations of this, and particularly when it comes to security and isolation. So we see that there might be a need for a dedicated core network, such as in a private network, right? And there's also often the need to onboard and integrate third-party applications into the slices with specific quality of service. There might also be need for edge clouds. We see a lot, and we also do that together with Kenneth and the work there. And there might also be the need to integrate with external management systems and also other services. And of course, also then when we talk about the need for different service models, the subscription models, and also the contract models, and so forth. Here you go. So we need that flexibility in order to also tailor the service and the slice to the specific customer need. And that's what we do. And I would say that 5G should be looked at more as a toolbox rather than just a solution in itself. And that's how we work with it, and we try to tailor it for the specific uses. Though, of course, there's a question like there's a cost of doing that, right? And these are things we are looking into. So, and in order to make this service creation and operation as efficient and customer friendly, I would say, as possible, we do follow standards and cloud native paradigms. We are using APIs, standard interfaces, and so forth to make that efficient. And we try to also build that that flexibility in using cloud native paradigms, like we have been also working with Kenneth and the military and other vertical industries. So I think throughout this project, both the operators, the verticals, and the vendors and partners involved have learned a lot about this in the project. So and that's also what we try to share in open spaces.
Great, thanks, Paul. David, can I bring you into the conversation at this stage? Have you got any thoughts about how these network slices will be offered to verticals, and how flexible they'll be?
Well, they're going to be incredibly flexible. It's going to be possible to customize a slice to an individual vertical sector's requirements. And in doing so, you'll have to understand their business model a little. And I think this is going to be one of the challenging parts of the evolution, that the network operator, as the provider of the infrastructure, is going to have a good enough relationship with the vertical sector to actually understand what performance they require from the network and how this can be delivered to their satisfaction. And I think in terms of all the prices and that, well, the issue here is that if I have set up a slice for my business, for my needs, I can't end up with costs that are higher than using the public infrastructure. So I need to have a price model that allows me to be competitive and effective in this. So we'll have to work out a pricing and a cost structure that allows the end user domains to be competitive in their marketplace. The extra challenge for us is that it's very unlikely that these customer domains will stay inside one operator domain. So we will actually have to have inter-operator agreements to look after slices and have understandings between several operator domains as to how the quality is maintained when you cross these boundaries. And it could be that the vertical sector has their own private 5G network at some point in the future. So that has to be another consideration in the picture. So we have this conflicting challenge of increasing complexity in the network and in the infrastructure, versus the flexibility that the customers and the end users will require. And this is going to be a real challenge for us.
Certainly. Thanks, David. Deepa, do you want to quickly add some comments to this one before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I had some interesting perspectives to chip in here. So one thing I think we are talking, and I'm hearing from the comments, for example, made so far by the panel is enterprises are looking at connect anything, connect anywhere, but the bold underlined word is have a sense of control. So they know exactly what they want. They want specific characteristics that their services need to meet, right? So on one angle is to have exactly private networks like David was talking about. But then there are also countries, for example, spectrum is not available directly for enterprises, or the costs are prohibitive, or operational competence doesn't exist. So I'm seeing also a lot of cases where network as a service is being demanded. So at least Nokia had this experience working with, for example, PLDT Smart in Asia Pacific, where they're really looking at services beyond the connectivity services. But the key points are they are based on what they need. They have to be always online, completely automated in the front end and the back end, and more available in a self-service mode. So they will ask for the service, they open it to their consumers to consume as they want, right? So for us to be able to do that, I think it's very important when we are talking about this cost angle. I would completely echo Paul's sentiments in terms of a standards-led approach. I think if you also look at the 5G Vinnie case, right, we have a completely multi-vendor ecosystem across different components coming from access, core, and transport, and so on. So you need a system which is very adhered to the standards so that the integration costs are really low. It has to be extremely flexible. So to address, the slice, as Kenneth was talking about in terms of a military, where there is a separate special requirements on security or isolation, this can be already orchestrated in the right way at the time the slice is created. But then you have a very strong automation system which can monitor the slice and ensure that the key performance expected by the service is really met so that the end user experience is guaranteed. So I think a holistic approach which is open and automated will become fundamental for keeping the costs under check.
And the next question's about how network slicing, edge computing and cloud technology are all tightly connected to 5G, offering vast possibilities. But the verticals themselves also need sourcing competence to take advantage of the possibilities. What challenges does this present to verticals such as yourself in the healthcare profession?
So health sector is quite a conservative sector, and it's not willing to embrace new technology just because they don't want to do it, but just because they feel that they need to consider all kind of aspects related to data and network issues. And here, for example, I think it will be very important for them to get the knowledge when it comes to the what 5G is offering, and what cloud technology potentially can be useful when it comes to the health use cases. So I think in this sense, it's going to be about knowledge transfer, collaboration, cross-fertilization. It's important, and also to try to engage the health vertical industries in this regard. So I think in this 5G Heart, using the 5G Vinnie platform project, we have several big medtech companies are involved. So I think this is a very good sign of understanding how this collaboration can foster to create new health services in the future.
Thank you for those perspectives, Ilanko. And Kenneth, maybe I could turn to you for information from yourself about the need for sourcing competence from your particular sector.
So this is not just about buying SIM cards anymore or buying price plans. So 4G was big, but 5G will be so much more. It is about seeing possibilities and establishing new partnerships. And for sure, the verticals will need architects that actually understands these value chains and the new possibilities. And this can be challenging since very few knows both telecommunication and IT, including cloud computing. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Kenneth. Now the questions are continuing to filter their way through to me here, and we've got a question come in on security. In a hyper-connected 5G world, the threat landscape will change rapidly. Apps, terminals, IoT devices can all be attacked. Now, the mobile network operators may be prepared for this, but are the vertical industries? Do verticals have the skills and competence required? And if not, who do they turn to? Ilanko, what's your views here from your sector?
So when it comes to the health sector, so we have, normally we have medical devices, and medical devices have been approved with certain type of connectivity, and they are kind of approved devices. The challenge becomes when we have wearables. The patients or users would like to use their own devices and connect them to the network and exchange the data with physicians, and this actually is becoming commonly used and commonly considered as a very interesting and important data. But on the other hand, it's posing a lot of security threats when it comes to the data security itself, and also the authentication, so that we know exactly which person is using this device or the wearables, and the data belongs to that person. So all these parts actually is posing a lot of interesting questions to us, and also to the network operator to understand how to make use of this data, which is so interesting and important for us. At the same time, also is willing to provide a good amount of level of security and services in a guaranteed way.
Thanks, Ilanko. Deepa, let me turn to you for some thoughts on this question.
I think when we talk about 5G, it's very dynamic. It has a very open architecture. So it's extremely important that when you're looking at security, I mean, Ilanko was talking from the devices side. Let me comment from a systems angle, right? So it's very important to have a unified and an intelligent security management and assurance system in place. So I would think that there are four primary themes that, from a security perspective, that we should always have in mind. That we have the right means to continuously check and assess the security posture and the risk levels of the network, right? It's not just a once in a year audit that we are used to, but more real-time monitoring of the systems to make sure that there's been no compromise. Second, very important is also that we need to have the right controls and limit the access. So you need real role-based controls. This is not just at the perimeter of the system, but also going all the way down to the command execution level to make sure that we have no holes left. Third dimension, I would say, would be to make sure that we can detect any threats early enough. So you need, since the system is complex and there are different points of entry, it's important to have a holistic approach, which is looking at an integrated, intelligent solution, correlating aspects based on AI and ML, so that the threats can be detected and, if possible, even proactively, so that response or actions can be taken much before the system is exposed. And last but not the least, of course, is the rapid response in case you have an attack. So we are conventionally used to manual response systems, or B, because the threats are varying and evolving as we speak. Not everyone is, the resources or the people are not competent enough always to handle any type of security attack. So it's important to have an automated security management and assurance system in place so that it can detect these attacks quickly enough and take rapid actions before the impact causes any significant, cause a problem to the network. So I think a holistic approach centered around automated security management and assurance would become very key in this 5G landscape.
Thank you, Deepa. And Kenneth, what's your take on the threat landscape?
I just some keywords here: partnerships, and to get competence across many domains. And there is no end to the work. This will be a continuous work. Yeah,
thanks, Kenneth. And Paul, let me bring you into this question as well. Obviously, the M&Os are more prepared for this and more experienced, but do the verticals have the skills and competence required? And, if not, do they turn to their operator partners for help here?
Yeah, so I think I'm really happy this topic is being brought forward, and very good points by Deepa and Ilanko, and the input from Kenneth as well. And we do for sure. I mean, in the 5G Vinnie project, if you look at that, we have been working a lot within security, and also speaking from a Telenor point of view, security is put all the way at the top of everything we do, and 5G it's no exception. So I think we do work a lot with the verticals when it comes to security, listening to their input, what do they need, because there's a lot of levels when it comes to security. And then my view is definitely that Telenor is a trusted partner to come to for discussing security. And I think Deepa pointed out some really important points there regarding security and all what's happening around 5G. And there are many advances within 5G, and one is the end-to-end encryption with the subscription concealed identity, the SUKI part, which we, by the way, have been testing with Kenneth and the team with good success. And that's one part. And also to fill in a bit on another part is, of course, with the network slicing and the use of cloud technologies with 5G. Is where we see a lot of new work going in. And so there also is an area where we implemented a strong security model in our cloud, and also proved this by testing with external and also cloud internal attacks, which really proved the importance of it. And what we do see is that this holistic security, security by design, is extremely important for the verticals when they come in. So I would say that there are, back to the kind of the level of competency on security, we see a lot of different levels of competency. Some have a lot of competency within security, whereas others have less. But I think this is also an area where we learn every day. And by working with some verticals, we understand to what level should we put the security, what security functionality and protection should we put in. And that is also helping us doing that for across all other vertical industries.
Thank you, Paul. And again, it comes down to reinforces the importance of partnerships and trust. Now, we are about halfway through our live Q&A program. So a reminder to our audience, please keep sending in your questions and we'll try and answer as many as we can. And we've got a question here on the importance of test beds. Can the panel give examples of successful use of test beds in 5G Vinnie and discuss how this affects the learning curve for verticals? David, can I come to you for this one first?
Yes, that's an interesting question. And I think picking up a little from the previous discussion on the security, there's another element we have to consider when we consider the test beds and multiple slices being used to support multiple application areas. In that, we are giving rights to experts from the vertical domains to manage their own slice. And one of the challenging things we have to learn is how do they use that management competence? And we have to test our systems as well to find, are there any loopholes? For example, is there anything that a slice manager from one vertical sector can do that could actually impact the slice of another sector? Are these things completely separated, logically, physically, program-wise, however, so that they can't cross each other? Because equally bad as a security breach would be an outage caused by an innocent action of another customer who reconfigured something and thereby damaged a consequent service. So I think one of the key examples of the multiple applications being supported in the test beds, such as 5G Vinnie, is that we actually validate that the infrastructure can handle these different sets of requirements independently and successfully in parallel. And I think this is very important, and we have to be able to do this and guarantee it continually going forward. On the other side of it, we see, for example, in the other applications and other projects within the 5G PPP, there have been lessons learned, for example, from the automotive group on the cross-border corridors where the automotive applications are. One of the immediate lessons from the tests and the infrastructure challenges is that the service handover at the borders is simply not good enough today for advanced services. So this is an example where we've determine through the experiments something needs to be improved, and we can start working on that straight away.
Thank you, David. Kenneth, what about yourself? Have test beds been important to you?
For sure. I'll give you some practical examples where we actually need to have test beds. So we have been playing in Norway with the TDD frame structure, so we can get more uplink capacity in the network. You know, in commercial networks, it's very fixed. Everybody has to, well, in Norway at least, they have 4 time slots down and 1 up. And all operators need to have that. We have 50% more uplink capacity compared to other commercial 5G networks in one of our test facilities. And it has been very useful for us in use cases where we need, for instance, to send video uplink. And in our tests, we have tested use cases related to beyond line of sight drone control or 5G, paramedic use case using HoloLens, 5G-enabled HoloLens, media use case with remote production via 5G to the national broadcaster NRK. We also have tested out electronic warfare or jamming, and this is not possible in a commercial network. And the results of these tests will benefit the whole society. What is the impact of jamming, and how can we mitigate the threat? We have tested so-called application functions, meaning that we can get services directly from the defense network slice. We have added multiple services. For instance, we have a gunshot detection system running in the 5G Vinnie network. Every policeman becomes a sensor with his smartphone, and a shooter can be pinpointed on a map where somebody is shooting from. And by use of machine learning and artificial intelligence, we can also tell what kind of weapon was shooting. We have been performing penetration testing. We have been playing with IMSI catchers and SUKI support, subscriber concealed identifier, in our test beds to mitigate the IMSI catcher threat. But the test beds have also shown us where we will fail and what direction not to go in. For instance, we started off by using IMS services and found out that it was not suitable for our needs. And the complexity related to handsets, OEM manufacturers, and who was in control was not an option for us. So in general, we also have faced many problems related to handsets and compatibility, for instance, related to use of test PLMN IDs. And we needed test beds to find out these things.
Oh, that's very interesting. Thanks, Kenneth, for that. Now, we've got a quick question in for Ilanko here. Very specific, very short as well. What is the latency requirement to guarantee reliable operation of medical use cases such as your 5G PILCAM, which you talked about in our earlier program?
So this pill is, the PILCAM is like a small, tiny little pill with a camera, which is going to take images on the GI tract and transmitting these images. So the pill is actually moving. And while the pill is moving, we want to transmit the data to an edge computer or a cloud to do real-time analysis to see if we can detect polyps. And then once we detect polyps, we want to have high-resolution imaging, so send the signal back to the pill so that the camera parameters could be optimized. So when the pill is moving with a speed around 2 to 5 millimeter per second, we hope to have the latency, the round time around 30 to 50 milliseconds, because it's taking images in the 30 frames per second, so it's around roughly 30 milliseconds. So if we can, given that pill is also moving not that fast, if we can have around 30 to 50 milliseconds, I think we should be able to do a real-time analysis and really get those fantastic images that we can get.
Great, thanks, Ilanko, for that answer. Another question that's just come through to me just in the last few minutes here for Deepa. Can Nokia explain how the Network Operations Center will evolve to support multiple private network scenarios, isolated hybrid network slicing, from an operations and management point of view?
I think one of the fundamental needs for us to handle in this, when you're talking about these different network scenarios, right, there are different dimensions to it. One, from a functional point of view, I think it's very important that we are able to capture the requirements at an end-to-end level, from a customer-facing level, and translate it to the needs, what has to be understood by the individual domains below, whether it's access, core, or transport. Right. So one is to make sure that the requirements are translated, administered onto the different domains, and then importantly, constantly monitor how the performance is. There are multiple control loops in action, one on the individual domains level, and then the one at an overall end-to-end level, which is making sure that the service goal is met. So this, I would say, is from a purely functional perspective on how the digital operations have to evolve. And that's where Nokia is making big strides in terms of having our digital operations center, which has an orchestration and an assurance center tied with a unified inventory, which is able to have a holistic view of the network and to take the right actions at the right time. But then the other perspective, and which is very fundamental, I think Paul touched upon it a little while ago, was also related to if you are deploying in different environments. So you mentioned about hybrid networks, which are talking about physical devices as well as virtual devices. You need to have the flexibility or dynamicity to handle that scale. Right, you need to be also have that flexibility to deploy in any environment which is needed. So we are seeing more activities happening on the cloud. So it's also important in terms of having the software very dynamic, cloud native, so that we can support any deployment architecture, but also support the scale which is needed, so that you deploy the resources on demand. You don't need to have a huge footprint to start with, but you are able to dynamically grow as the need occurs. So I think that's the second dimension. And the third very important dimension is also taking the inputs or continuously learning. So the networks are never static. And the operations which we need to take, or remedial actions we need to take to make sure that the network performance is always maintained, is always not the same. Right? So there has to be a continuous learning system which is powered by artificial intelligence and machine learning, which has to be tied in very strongly to our operations, so that we are becoming more effective, shifting our problem statement, or making sure that we have the idea or looking at the anomalies which are there in the network and take proactive actions so that the network quality is maintained. So different dimensions in which Nokia is working to address the specific need.
Thanks very much, Deepa, for that answer. Now we are moving along. A lot of questions coming in late in the show, so we'll try and get through as many more as we possibly can. So here's a question. Paul, I think I'm going to ask you this one first. When will we see more of the 5G Vinnie use cases rolled out commercially?
Yeah, that's a good question. What should I say? Some of the use cases we work on will come soon, and some will take longer time. I think also what you can see is that there are some services used by large and potentially complex organizations that work with 5G Vinnie, and they do that in order to learn and gain in confidence that 5G is the best path. And also many of these organizations, they go through digital transformations, and they will start using 5G at different times. And throughout this work that we are doing, the verticals, they can define their strategies on when or if to use 5G, and then engage in commercial processes. But on the other side, there are verticals that will start using 5G right away. So I think looking at the organizations and the complexity and timing is one important part. But I also believe that one of the important tenets and also an important success factor of 5G Vinnie is that there are no commercial bindings. Both the 5G Vinnie partners and the verticals engage in order to learn, develop, and prove the value. And I think maybe importantly, none of the partners would engage if we didn't believe 5G is here to bring business success. So I believe that, or the commercial processes for when to use 5G it can start independently of the trials, during the trials or after, and in any case, always using the learnings that we get out of 5G Vinnie, both for the operator side and also the verticals and also the vendor side. So no concrete answer, but it is going to happen.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So as you say, maybe we can see some commercial services happen before the end of a trial period. It doesn't have to necessarily wait till the end of a trial. David, have you got any thoughts on this as well? Is it very much a sector by sector basis as when we might see these services or use cases rolled out commercially?
Actually, I'd say no. It's not a sector by sector basis. It's more within sectors. You're going to see certain companies being how will I say, the leaders, the innovation, the early adopters of the 5G potential. It'll be somehow related to the degree of digitization achieved in these industry sectors. And in Europe, we're actually not great on digitization. We're still only at about 20% of industry. So if you like, there needs to be a push to help many sectors adopt the benefits of the digital era and really migrate to new systems, and then they will become the players in the 5G infrastructure. We're at the stage where the 5G infrastructure is being rolled out quite effectively, so the opportunity is now there, and we're going to see several players get an advantage because they can actually get the benefits of using the new infrastructure. So I think it'll be down to the early adopters within individual sectors taking the lead and pushing forward their applications as they see it and getting benefits for their business, and probably the rest of the sector following. We'll also see some synergies between sectors happen in this, and we'll find new collaborations and new partnerships coming out of it.
Great, thanks, David. As you say, as and when they see the business benefit, they'll move things forward. That's great. Thank you both for your answers to that question. Another question in here. How do you get verticals to engage with 5G Vinnie and help to innovate with new use cases? Ilanko, maybe I could just start with you and your experience with 5G Vinnie and maybe ideas of how to get other verticals to engage.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think first of all, this is like a learning curve for health vertical. For example, the example that I could touch upon is that a lot of new informations are coming and opportunities are opening up, and using some of those use cases as an examples and learning curve to understand the complexity of the network and the opportunities are there. So this is going to be like a public-private partnership where we can make leverage on a little bit more simple, low-hanging fruits. Some of those examples that I mentioned as part of this PillCam, for example, or robotic examination of ultrasound using a robotic arm, requiring low latency applications. I think most likely it's going to be on remote monitoring with simple devices, but of course with a high level of security is embedded on the device as well as on the network side, so the data could be trusted. I think those type of simple application would be maybe the first ones to be potentially could be considered, and new small companies they can try to build on this 5G platform. But then, of course, more complex, applications like PillCam and other applications most likely will take a little bit longer time. But I think that this will eventually will come down the road.
Thanks, Ilanko. Kenneth, from your experience, how do you get verticals to engage with 5G Vinnie and help innovate new use cases?
So I'm the 5G coordinator for the defense sector, and I'm in contact with many internal organizations under our umbrella, dealing with everything from health to logistics, where the potential is enormous with 5G. So I'm in close connection to the end users and their problems, and together with Telenor Research, we have been sitting around the table and designing the solution and testing it out in the field step by step. The problem in our case has actually been resources. It is difficult these days to get people with the right technical skills.
Thanks, Kenneth. And David, how do we get verticals to engage with 5G Vinnie to innovate new use cases?
Well, actually, I just wanted to give a little bit of experience we've had within the 5G PPP, in that we have launched the 5G Vinnie project and two other peer projects on infrastructures. And then shortly afterwards, we had a call for projects with ideas for applications, for trials. And it was very successful. It was, of course, hopelessly oversubscribed. Something like 35 proposals, and in the end, only 8 or 9 projects could be funded. But the interesting point was it attracted in a huge number of new players into the, if you like, the ICT domain, into the traditional communications domain discussions. So we have in those projects, we have well over 100 new vertical sector players who want to experiment with 5G services and who want to do trials. So I think we don't have an inherent problem to attract them. We do have an inherent problem to bring them up to speed. And when we talk about giving them slices in that, we have to give them the support necessary, that they know what to do with the slice and they know how they can get the advantages from it. And I think this is where the partnerships between the infrastructure providers and the vertical sectors have to work out how much can the vertical sector do for themselves and how much do they need done for them in the network as a service concept, which was mentioned earlier, idea.
Thanks, David. A question here relating to KPIs and SLAs. In today's 5G world, where the network slice concepts and their vertical use case business needs are better understood, what is the current situation on common standards or industry-agreed performance benchmarks for monitoring and measuring the slice performance? And indeed, are there any universally agreed benchmarks? Deepa, let me put that question to you first.
Sure. So I think from a 5G standalone point of view, if you look at it, there has been a significant presence of standards, both from GSMA and 3GPP, which guides in terms of what operations are supported, how can it be flexibly adapted to support the different use case needs, right? So starting with a very flexible architecture, so you have a communication service management function at the top, followed by the network slice management function, which is looking at the service and decomposing it into the needs which are needed by each of the domains, whether it's access, core, or transport. And then you have the network subnet slice management functions, which are taking care of their own domains and looking at what needs to be done, starting from a lifecycle management. So create a slice, configure the slice, activate the slice. And then when the need is no longer there, deactivate the slice and decommission the slice. So there are very neat standards, for example, the 28.541, for example, in the orchestration space, which really calls out what needs to be done. Then you also spoke about the assurance part. So there as well, there are very tight standards talking about how the metrics have to be collected, how the alarm management has to be done. You have 28.552, which is talking exactly related to the flow of information. So assurance works in different levels. So you have a control loop happening at the domain, which is managing the domain-specific health, looking at the parameters via the NFMF to see how that is performing. But then you have a wider end-to-end control loop, which is looking at the service. So if, for example, in this case, the internet service, to make sure that you are able to have a guaranteed performance and the right balancing is done across the necessary domains to achieve it. So there is a very strong presence of standards, which is guiding the operations, but also ensuring that we have the right flexibility to support the different vertical needs, because the use cases are vastly different.
Thanks, Deepa. And yes, what we would give for a 5G network slice now. Perhaps we should sign up ourselves to the 5G Vinnie program. Paul, perhaps I could get your perspectives from the operator's point of view as to benchmarks, performance benchmarks, and agreeing SLAs to ensure that we have the correct slice performance.
Yeah. Oh, that's an important topic that we have been working a lot on in 5G Vinnie and in general as well. So, trying to explain a bit about how it works is that, we have this end-to-end orchestration system, which basically receives orders from the customers, right? And then we are then describing the services or the network slice as a service as we offer it in kind of a network slice template or descriptor, if you want. And there we specify the KPIs. And then the orchestrator is then provisioning or setting up these network resources in the core transport radio domains, and also doing that in accordance to reach the KPIs with the specific quality of service. And when in operation, then we monitor. And I think there has been said a lot, especially from Deepa here, about the importance of service assurance and monitoring of these KPIs, and potentially taking proactive or reactive actions in order to make sure that it's working properly. Then also back to the question about the standards, I think one important input from the 5G Vinnie, or a contribution from the 5G Vinnie project in cooperation with other projects like the 5G Eve and 5G Genesis projects as well, is the start of a group within ETSI actually looking into the specification of the KPIs and how to do that measurement. So please have a look at that as well.
Great, thank you for that, Paul. Ilanko, I'm not sure if you wanted to come in on this question yourself.
No, I think this will be very important to look into the standards. So the ETSI work with SmartBand work in Europe, and also some of the IEEE work going on. I think it will be quite important to see how to integrate with ongoing standards and works, and also all the way down to low level, implementations are taking place. Short range communication systems with health profiles, and how to integrate them into the 5G work profiles, and make sure that different type of sensor information has correct profiling and everything, so that the information could be easily integrated onto the end user's application. I think this is a very important part of the work. Otherwise, it will be quite difficult to integrate specific devices into the system, which can the data could be integrated, and also to provide them in a way that the health professionals can take leverage on them.
Great, thank you, Ilanko. Now, I'm aware of the time, and I'm aware that we are approaching at the top of the hour, so I think we've just got time to squeeze in one final question, and hopefully you can all comment on this one, some brief final comments from all of you. And the question is, what advice do you all have for vertical industries that are looking at the possibilities of 5G network slicing? What should be their next steps, or I guess in some cases their first steps? David, let me start by asking you, what's your advice to verticals?
I think the only advice you can give them at this stage is to talk to people. I mean, talk to the providers like Telenor and that, and talk to their peers. For example, we have two highly skilled application domains represented here, the hospitals and the national services. And these early adopters are actually testing the infrastructure and finding out what it can do and how it can be specific for them. And we need to share this experience, and we need to get more people with the confidence to take it up. And I think there's going to be a real advantage in different sectors for the guys who move quicker and take up these services first.
Indeed. Thank you very much, David. Paul, advice for verticals considering network slicing?
Yeah, I think important to get there. I mean, my main advice would be to engage and work together, because partnerships and co-creation is needed in this space, and that's our main experience throughout all the work. So, and of course, when doing that, some key values or principles that maybe to mention is that be open. Openness is really important. Be humbleness. There's always something to learn, and of course, work together. I mean, join forces. We are better together. That's the key experience, and there's so much learning. So I would just encourage all the verticals to engage. So please reach out.
Absolutely, good advice. Ilanko, final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think I certainly agree with other panelists about engaging, having that conversation, and also those early adapters looking into the use cases and the knowledge gain. I think we also have an obligation to inform industry partners and also the public about the possibility of using these type of networks in the future. and potentially what type of applications could be considered, so that innovators, whether they are industry innovators or other type of innovators, or even in academia, students could also potentially consider developing new applications, health services, using the 5G network possibility, also including the slicing. I think seems to be a lot of interesting opportunities. I would start that conversation. I think that would be maybe my advice to people working with me in this use case in 5G Mini and the 5G hard projects.
Thank you, Alanko. And Kenneth, what would your advice be to verticals looking at network slicing?
Yeah, the MNOs very often have test beds. So just as Paul also said here, stop thinking, start engaging, and start testing.
Excellent. Thank you. And Deepa, final comments from you.
I think the verticals, whether they're looking at private networks or network as a service, I think they need to have clearly what is the consumption model going to be, how rapidly do they need their services, how open the system needs to be. And I think the other very important tip that I would say is that you don't necessarily need to wait for 5G standalone for network slicing. I mean, Nokia, for example, has already a patent pending solution based on 4G, 5G NSA for you to start slicing. So get going as soon as you want.
Get going. Great advice. Thank you all very much indeed. And with that, we'll draw our live Q&A program to a close. Thank you all very much for taking part today and for answering so many viewer questions. And if you have yet to watch the previous two programs in this series, then simply click on the links below this video window. In the first program, we heard from Paul and David on the background to 5G Vinnie, and in the second, we heard from Ilanko about the use cases at Oslo University Hospital, and from Deepa on orchestration and automation. Do please try and watch them if you can. For now, though, thank you to everyone who sent in their questions about 5G Vinnie, and apologies because we didn't have time to get through all of them. We had so many, especially in the final 20 minutes or so of the programme. But from all of us here, thank you very much for watching and goodbye.